Welcome to Fintech Chatter News, presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. Follow us on your favorite podcast player or Fintech Chatter TV on YouTube.
Welcome to Fintech Chatter News. I'm Dexter Cousins, and this week there's really only one news topic: Intersekt. It was a massive week for the Aussie Fintech industry. Intersekt 22 was bigger and better than ever. 2 days of conversations, insights, friendships being formed, and connections being made, along with lots of reunions, laughs, hugs, and parties. Almost 1,000 people attended the sellout event in what was a defining moment for the fintech industry in Australia. Ben Ford from Frollo is going to join me in a few moments to give a full review of Intersekt. I had hundreds of conversations at Intersekt. If you came up and said hi, thanks so much. I am genuinely blown away by the support for the podcast and the impact it has. It was a real highlight getting to meet so many listeners in person. Also had many conversations with founders, CEOs, board advisors, and investors. And it really has given me, I'd say, an accurate pulse on the market right now. So I thought instead of a news roundup, I'd share with you some of the insights I gained from those conversations and what it might mean for fintech over the next 12 months or so. Well, first up, let's talk about funding. Yes, it has been difficult, but deals are happening. Mainly at seed and Series A stage. I'd say pretty much every VC and investor I spoke to was clear that they want to see revenue and they want to see product market fit and a strong use case. There's also a lot more scrutiny on founders to ensure that the capital is being spent wisely on mission-critical hires and driving revenue growth. It seems a little insane to be even saying this, but lean startup is very much back in fashion. There's still some shithousery going on with term sheets being pulled at the last minute, but it is giving opportunities to fintechs who offer alternative sources of funding. Could this be an opportunity for companies like Fundable or FundSquire, who actually had a heavy presence at Intersekt, to really kick on in 2023? Who knows? For lending fintechs, life is getting tougher, especially if their warehouse funding deals are up for renewal. There's definitely pressure in the home lending space as sales drop and the cost of funding has increased 5x in 2022. With another rate increase coming, the pressure is continuing to mount. Offering interest-free credit is proving very costly. And I am seeing buy now, pay later businesses start to reinvent their propositions. Last year, every lending business was wearing the BNPL badge, but now many fintechs are trying to rid themselves of that badge. So I expect to see a lot of consolidation and transformation in these businesses. So look, where is the good news? Well, I was pleasantly surprised by the energy and optimism last week. I was half expecting to walk into, a little bit more of a subdued event. The week started off very positively on Monday by joining up with the UK Fintech delegation. I covered some of the attendees in last week's show, and there's a link in the show notes if you want to go and check that out. I'd really encourage it. There's some really interesting businesses in there. For me, it's always good to get an outsider's view, and generally, the feedback that I received from the delegation was positive. Most of the delegates felt Australia could be a place that could do business. And some of our guests from the UK were genuinely excited by the Australian opportunity. The energy wasn't blind optimism. I think pretty much everyone I spoke to at Intersekt acknowledged the challenges that we're currently facing. But there is, I guess, an acceptance or a view that we're moving into phase 3 of fintech. What do I mean by that? Well, if I cast my mind back 4 years ago and Cybos 2018, that for me was a landmark moment in fintech down under. It's the point where I personally felt I'd made the right business decision by specializing in fintech. I've got to be honest, I've had some doubts over the past 12 months, especially with the noise around Web3. But Intersekt has rekindled my belief and passion for fintech, and here's why. Payments, DeFi, accounting, cost management, business lending, home loans, and tech infrastructure are all growth opportunities here in Oz. The discussions in payments were all about tokenization, CBDCs, and DeFi. The worlds of blockchain and payments have completely merged here in Australia, and it was great to see both of my networks on both sides of the fence getting together and talking about the path forward. My fundamental belief is that these technologies would always play a role, but my hesitation has been centered around the technology usurping sovereign currencies. I think that dream is over, and we're clearly seeing a world where the two can coexist and enable rapid innovation. Another area that I'm really excited by is from my perspective as a business owner. CX and UX is woeful with my business banking, accounting systems, and there's very little integration. I'm genuinely excited by the solutions being built by my friends at Cape, Friday, Henry, Gigsters, Patron, and as I mentioned, some of the alternative funding sources like Fundable and FundSquare. I recorded chats with Ryan from Cape and Benjamin from MyGigsters, and there are links in the show notes. MyGigsters is a great example of why I'm so optimistic. My key takeaway from last week is this. Australian fintech is now a self-sufficient industry. Fintechs are building solutions that enable other fintechs. Back in 2018, a platform like MyGigsters would have been very difficult to build and would have taken some serious capital. Benjamin has been able to build something fast, at low cost, and get it in the hands of 3,000 customers, and he's only been going for 12 months. It's this infrastructure that enables rapid innovation. I think personally, lean startup really suits the Aussie market. We've got a high proportion of entrepreneurs. Almost 10% of the population own a business or are a sole trader. There was also a lot of talk about hiring at Intersekt. And certainly I've seen that at an executive level, it started to ramp up again after a quiet couple of months. There are some important trends to be aware of, and that is that all hires I'm working on now require execs with experience of managing through a downturn. Even chief product officer roles have an emphasis that's shifting from tech and UX to leaders who can manage a P&L and demonstrate growing top line while reducing costs. If you started your career post-GFC, this may seem a little strange to you, but for those who went through the GFC, it looks like your experience could be in demand over the next 18 months. Over the last 6 months, we've seen redundancies, and unfortunately, more will follow. So far, the majority of redundancies have been poor performers, quiet quitters, and those who refuse to return to the office. I've been vocal over this last 6 months to try and prepare my network for the change we're experiencing. We all face a harsh reality now, and it's this. There's only one indicator that your operating model is working, and it's profitability. We've gone through phase 1 of redundancies, and that's by letting go of people who you won't miss. Don't let those crying CEO posts on LinkedIn fool you. There have been some serious performance and attitude issues for leadership to deal with over the last 2 years. But we're now hitting phase 2 of redundancies, where great people are let go and top talent will hit the market. If you're a startup founder, don't get too excited just yet. Salaries continue to be an issue, and I see future pain for companies who have recently hired 150k candidates at 300k salaries. As one CEO pointed out to me, at 160k they were great, but at 300k I'd expect 3 times the output I'm getting from them today. Elevating talent to their first exec position with only a few years' experience under their belt is like sending lambs to the slaughter in this current climate. If you have had staff poached from you and your competitors have been offering huge salaries, this might actually strengthen you and weaken your competitors, as I expect to see serious levels of burnout as a result of this practice. And it's why I think profitable businesses will become the most sought after by talent. If I remember back to the GFC, unfashionable, profitable companies were able to attract top talent from investment banks and management consultancies, as those people sought a safe haven. Commonwealth Bank is a great example where they've transformed into one of the best run digital banks in the world. I'm already seeing outstanding people avoid startups for more stable companies as we navigate this uncertain period. So the fintechs who run lean, generate revenue, and have product market fit will not only attract the best talent, but also the best investors. Well, I'm joined now by a man who needs no introduction at all, Ben Ford from Frollo. Ben.
Hi, Dexter. How are you?
I'm very, very good, my friend. How have you recovered from Intersekt?
Look, it took a while, but I've pulled up pretty well, and I've spent a bit of time reflecting on Intersekt, and it was a great time. But I think we can sort of talk through some of the highs, the lows, and some of the key talking points as we work through this.
That would be cool. Give some context. I think you and I first met it was 2017, but I think our first Intersekt would have been 2018. So kind of veterans, really. What was your thoughts on Intersekt 22?
Well, my first Intersekt was 2017, actually.
Wow.
So I think that was the first year that it was staged, and that was at the Melbourne Exhibition and Conference Centre. And at the time, this was when fintech was just sort of, I guess, hitting a bit of a critical mass or just taking off. And there were already some established players, but to see it have sort of grown over the years and really sort of, I guess, I felt this year we saw a bit of a maturity of the fintech ecosystem. I think some of the sort of frothy enthusiasm that we've had in previous years, rightly so, has sort of reached potentially a bit of a plateau in certain areas. And I think there was a bit more of sort of sober reflection, a bit of a sign of the times, but also a lot of positives to come away from it as well. And I guess one of the key ones is just the sheer inclusiveness and acceptance of the fintech ecosystem across the board.
Awesome. Now, from your side, what would you say were kind of some of the main talking points?
I think a couple of the key ones that probably got talked to death, if I'm honest, and that's both a good and a bad thing. I think the CDR and open banking, seems to take up, unfortunately, continually such a lot of the program. And I say unfortunately because it'd be great to see more rubber hitting the road. We can dig into that a bit more as we.
I've got to confess, mate. I didn't go to any of the discussions because I knew the conversations were going to be exactly the same as they were in 2019, exactly the same as they were last year. And from what I've been told, this year they were exactly the same as those years.
I think some of them were, and we were cognizant of that at Frollo in a couple of the ones that we were partook in or we were involved in. You and I were discussing this prior to recording. I would love to, we were in one of the sessions with Scott Farrell about open banking payments, and it would have been great to ask him for his opinion on where we are if things have taken longer than he envisaged back in 2017-18 when he wrote his original report. I was around the open banking traps back then, and certainly it feels like we've been pushing a lot of stuff uphill to get to where we are now. We did try and dispel some myths and show that there are now, I think there's somewhere in the region of 36 or 37 CDR representatives. So that's 36 fintechs that have identified open banking as being an optimal way of using bank and financial data. We've got to remember that bank data pretty much underpins the entire fintech ecosystem, or a lot of it to some degree. So in February of this year, there were none. And now we've got 36 or 37 fintechs ready to partake in. The volumes are still very, very low, but, the chess pieces are on the board. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom. And we can certainly point to some pretty solid data points now that we have, and some of our competitors have as well, that things are starting to move. But it would be great to see a supercharged acceleration over the next sort of 12 to 18 months to really sort of make all the pain from the previous 4 or 5 years worthwhile, Dexter.
One of the things that really kind of stood out to me, and I wasn't expecting this, was not so much the focus on business banking, but the focus on the SME market. And, probably unsurprisingly, a lot of cost management platforms, a lot of kind of accounting platforms for either, gig workers, startups, small businesses. I can't help but think that open banking has a far better use case to that market than the consumer market to start getting some immediate traction.
I think you're right. I think this was a question that someone posed. I forget who it was. Apologies to them, but it was a very relevant question they posed in one of the sessions we hosted. I kind of got the sense that with a bit more of a tailing wind, if we weren't in the sort of economic position we are now, this year's key theme, or one of the key thematics, could have been that whole expense management and that expense reduction sort of platform that you're talking about. Certainly in previous years, there's been a few of those guys knocking around. Obviously, we had Kate there this year. It's always great to see Ryan. His great value and what they're doing is fantastic. I think kind of that could have been this year's neobanking, this year's buy now, pay later, this year's wage advance sort of topic. But I think some of those companies, given the stage they're at, are sort of potentially struggling a little bit, or just sort of focusing on running the business rather than attending conferences. But I think you're absolutely right. I think the use cases are clear. I guess the thing that sort of stymies that a little bit is the fact that it is a consumer-led piece of legislation. It's called Consumer Data Right. Treasury have said, or the ACCC actually said, they consider small businesses to be consumers. But as I understand it, the ease with which, as I understand it, as I know, the ease with which small businesses can interact with open banking is a lot more cumbersome. So there's still physical things they need to do to make certain changes around the constitution of their business and so on. So I think it's unfortunately, we're getting tons of interest from the SME sector. Looking for open banking data, and I'm sure we'll get there. But like everything with open banking, it's a slow and steady war of attrition, or it feels like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, let's kind of talk into something a little bit more upbeat. There were some really cool businesses there as well. Which fintech really caught your eye?
There were a few that sort of jumped out. I didn't see too much of them. I didn't get to meet them. I didn't get to spend much time with the MyGigsters guys, but I heard several people raving about what they're doing. I know you've spoken to them, and I'm definitely going to make contact. I spent a fair bit of time chatting to Unhedged. Really interested in what they're doing and bringing their sort of unique investment thesis to consumers, and then their big platform offering as well. I shouldn't really say this because he's a competitor, but I really like the hustle that Jake from Fiscal has got going on at the moment. He's a very smart young guy. And I spent some time in the superannuation panel, and I guess I was sort of, what I really enjoyed about that, there was a real mix of companies. So there was Trenna and Super Fierce, which is fairly embryonic and nascent. There was Verve Super, Christina from Verve Super, which is a bit more mature. But also they had Stephen from Hester on the panel as well. And that was just a really sort of good balanced view, different stages of company, different outlooks on their industry, but kind of really got to, I guess what I'd say, the crux of what Intersekt was all about. from the get-go, the intersect between corporate and startup sort of businesses and how they can support and help each other. So those were the sort of startups involved in those sort of panels that interested me.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I was going to ask you what panels you went to see, mainly because I didn't go to see any, because I spent the whole time out in the hallways where it seemed to be all the kind of magic and the hustle and bustle was happening. What about you? Did you get to see many panels?
Similar to you, I kept it spare this year, but the ones I saw, I mentioned that superannuation, I think it was called Super Tech, that panel chaired by or moderated by Brian Collins. A couple of the CDR panels were interesting to me, but maybe not so much to you. The one I'm gutted I missed was the payments landscape or global trends through a local lens, where, as I understand it, a couple of the panelists really got into it and added a bit of spice. And if there's one thing I sort of think about some of these conferences, we're all a little bit too nice on some of these panels. Yeah. So devastated I missed that, because as I'm told, it really went off. But it would have been fascinating to watch.
Oh, look, I mean, any event that I go to, I rarely go to the panels, and it's not a criticism nor kind of anything to do with ego. It's just commercial sense that if I'm sat in a room of my competitors, I'm not talking about what I'm doing right now. I'm not talking about anything cutting edge. I'm not talking about anything or sharing anything that nobody doesn't already know. Yeah. And so you do find that they're kind of very vanilla and nice just because of those very reasons. So, it would have been good to see somebody kind of get the gloves off. They probably might let a key strategy slip or something like that. Now, the other thing that I guess Intersekt is famous for are the parties. And you touched on this kind of, I think, earlier when we spoke around maybe this year being a little bit more reserved. Certainly, I think the kind of, the parties aren't like they were back in the day, right? For very good reasons. We didn't have politicians and lawyers and shareholders and reporters and everybody else kind of who will be highly critical of the types of behaviors we used to kind of enjoy at these Intersekt parties. But what was your sense as to kind of the things that were happening afterwards and the things that were happening between the events?
First of all, I'd just say I know nothing about anything that you just described. However, I would say this year...
Come on, mate. There was something like 10 grand spent on tequila shots at the last year, wasn't there?
This year, I think I don't think so, to be honest. Certainly those that went to the Zepto party, as I understand it, give it a fairly good nudge. But I think you're right. I think there was a lot of sort of sponsor-led activity and a bit of corporate stuff as well. I think some of the roundtable dinners or some of the opening night dinners were very good. The pitch night was fantastic this year, really good. So props to them for putting that on, a really good startups pitching as well, and really engaged crowd. I think you're right. I think things have sort of matured a little bit over the years. It's not really that sort of new frontier anymore. And as I say, there's a bit more sort of corporate activity knocking around. But certainly, I think people did try their best to give it a nudge, but also being cognizant of the times as well.
Yeah. I mean, and this is to put it into context. I think this is actually a very positive thing, because if you go back to 2018. We were both at Cybos Sydney together, and I think that was when we kind of were like, all right, there's something kind of potentially real here. To think that Intersekt would end up, kind of being something along the lines of Cybos would have been unthinkable back then. And yet we had 1,000 people. Certainly, I would say that the buzz and, the kind of the professionalism of how it was organized and, the whole way in which it was put together. I mean, kudos to Fintech Australia. It was a fantastic event.
I agree. I mean, the level of professionalism was absolutely top drawer. It just seems to get marginally better every year, if that's possible. I think, funnily enough, Rayhan, I was with Rayhan in 2017. I think it would have been his first Intersekt, but he recently joined Fintech Australia as well. So we go back a long way. It's great to see him doing such a great job. But the rest of the team, they really, think of a lot of the minor details and make sure things run smoothly from the get-go. So, yeah, absolutely credit to them. And great that so many people, so many corporates are sort of sticking their nose in now and getting involved because, they can sort of write a few checks as well. So
yeah, absolutely, mate, absolutely. There were there was a sad moment for me. Some people who have been to previous events weren't there. Who did you miss?
I only met him last year at Intersekt, but I have such fond memories, and we've become pretty good mates since then. Adam from Sherlock, the original Sherdog, and then the other one who I really missed this year, very upset about that, was our old sparring partner Anthony from Wiser.
Yeah,
probably must be one of the first Intersekts he's not been to. And always enjoy duking it out with him. Usually it's at my expense, but he does it in such a loving way. I don't mind taking copping a bit of flack from him, to be honest.
Yeah, look, there were also the getting to see people that you've not met. I spent the VIP dinner, I think, all night with Paul Weingarth from Slip, where we'd known each other for nearly 3 years and never met, and it was just one of those nights where you meet somebody in the flesh and say, "Oh no, like this is going to be dangerous." so that was great. And look, I think the overall energy, right, and the people that were there. I mean, what struck me, the thing that was really different for me this year was the number of recruiters there, and to see them kind of going out and just pushing business cards and trying to do the sell, and you're like, look, it's not that type of event, right? Like, nobody's here to sell anything. We're just here to kind of congregate and share ideas and have some fun with each other. So I was kind of really pleased that theme was still there. A bit like yourself, was a little nervous that maybe's, the kind of mood might be a little bit more sedate just with the challenges that the industry has been facing this year. But certainly I kind of walked away not only feeling positive, but there were a lot of people wanted to talk about hiring. I was really surprised by that.
Fantastic. No, that's good. No, I think you're right. I mean, it sounds really cliche and really sort of cheesy to say it, but you're right. There was this kind of just buzz about the place, and I think you sort of said it was a bit like an old school reunion or something like that, and it kind of felt that way. It was highly collegiate, and there wasn't really. People weren't sort of jockeying or trying to outbid each other or outdo each other or compete on any level whatsoever. So, I really enjoyed that about it.
Yeah. Now, I did have one major disappointment.
Go on.
You didn't wear any merch. What was going on?
Look, that was a strategic decision.
So I've got to say that sweater that you wore on the first day, the pink cashmere thing, was gorgeous.
Thanks. I put a bit of thought into that. I thought wearing merch would have been like revealing a favourite child when you've got 70 or 80 children. So it would have been a disaster, Dexter. And, for me, Intersekt is not about, for once, it's not about collecting merch. It's about networking, having a good time, and doing my best for Frollo, so I could leave the merch hassling to one side, saving it for the Advent calendar, the Merchmas Advent calendar this year, give the merch a bit of a slide. I did see a lot of good merch knocking around though. So
what was your favorite piece of merch?
Well, I think the We Money guys merch.
Mate, I was going to say We Money, those sweatshirts were killer.
I don't even think they were sweatshirts, they were sweaters. I think
sweaters, sweaters they were, yeah.
So we've moved on from the hoodies. I don't know if you saw Shane from Yonder in the Yonder sweater as well, which again was, if you look closely, it looked like a sweatshirt, but it was actually a thin knit.
Right.
And that was the material on the We Money guys stuff. I love the fact they were all wearing a slightly different one. And if I'm not mistaken, then maybe want something like that winding its way to me. We'll have to see. But
yeah, Dan, if you're listening, mate, get them out in the post to us. Well, Ben, it was cool to catch up with you again. Look, I guess, wrapping up, what was your biggest highlight of Intersekt?
Oh, there were a few. I mean, the fact that we didn't have a fight was one. The fact
that not only that, but I actually gave you a compliment. Do you want to tell people what the compliment was?
Well, in response to you being called the voice of fintech, you called me the body of fintech, which was
that's correct. I did.
I was waiting for there to be a sting or a catch with that one, but there wasn't one. So you and me getting on so well was one. You not leading me 2 kilometers down the wrong street in the rain while I was on crutches was another. And I must say, Chris Rogers proffering me a T-shirt on bended knee was an absolute.
I've got that on video.
I've been waiting about 3 years for some merch from Chris, and for him to deliver the goods was the cherry on the icing on the cake for me, Dexter.
Awesome. Well, mate, great to catch up, and I was going to say, can't wait for the next Intersekt, but I'm sure I'll be seeing you way before then.
Great stuff, mate. See ya.
Well, thanks for listening, and make sure to check out our other interviews from Intersekt. There's links in the show notes. If you're coming back, thanks so much for your support. It really does mean the world to us. And if you're new to the show, hit follow and please leave us a review. It really helps us in promoting the Australian fintech ecosystem to a global audience. If you want to discuss hiring, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Dexter at tier1people.com. Until the next one, keep safe. Fintech Chatter is presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll help you build a world-class fintech venture by connecting you to world-class talent. And you can find out more at tier1people.com.